Common problems in fan dance. All right, right off the bat, let's just get into it. When the first violins come in and measure 6, they're already on the E string. Now, a lot of students, particularly for the classification in which this piece was composed for, they tend to not have the best E string tone. So one of the first things that we want to solve is that we want to have our students playing with good tone on the E string and playing in tune. So if you haven't already, check out my video on E string in season 1, and I've got a bunch of demonstration exercises to make sure that the students are able to play with straight bows and that they're not running into their legs and they're not doing silly stuff, and that they've got a good setup that's appropriate for the tone that you want to get. Now, if you're playing this spiccato or you're playing this colle, you don't need a whole lot of, if you're doing spiccato, you don't really need a heavy bounce on the E string. Okay, if you're doing it colle, you don't need a whole lot of, you don't need to push into the string before you come off. You can use fairly light bows and achieve the style that you want more through bow speed. You're gonna also wanna work on the finger patterns on the E string, make sure that everybody is playing low 2, and you might need some review on 4th finger for the B and getting the B in tune. And this comes back quite a bit, so getting the B to G in tune is pretty important. If they're struggling with the B, you can have them do some pull-up exercises to get them to loosen up. You can have them do some finger rolls. You can have them do a lot of things just to loosen up the hand. If they're having trouble with 4th finger, it's usually because they're squeezing and there's a lot of tension in that left hand. So if you can get them to loosen up, that's going to make a huge difference for those 4th finger Bs, and they're going to sound a lot better. They also need to use adequate finger pressure, or else you're not going to get the tone that you want. So make sure they're pushing down the strings, and that means they're going to need to have a good left hand shape. If they're twisting their wrists to play on the E string, sometimes they look good on the A string and then they go to the E string and they do this instead of rotate the shoulder out. Then they end up playing with flat fingers and they don't push down the strings hard enough and they get really bad tone and they're not accurate with their intonation. So you want to avoid that. Make sure the wrists are straight and make sure that they're rotating the shoulder when they're going to the E string so they can get good tone and good pitch. So the first violins have low 2 here, but there are spots where they have B naturals on the G string. Now there are very few C naturals in here, and for a good reason, because it doesn't fit the pentatonic scale for G pentatonic, but we do have a few of them, and they happen to be in the first violins and on the A string sometimes. But for the Bs, for instance, here in measure 41 on beat 4, we have a B. It's indicated high 2, but some students, especially in this level, they have some confusion about B naturals and B flats, because to play high 2, they see a sharp, right? You got to play F sharp to play high 2 on the D string. Oh, to play high 2 on the A string. Oh, well, you got to see a C sharp. To play a high 2 on the E string. Oh, well, you got to play a G sharp. But B natural is actually high 2. To play lower, you have to play B flat. So if they have some sort of a chromatic alteration in the part, or if there's something in the key signature that alters that pitch, it's visually a little different. And so some students have an issue with that. So you might want to review that. I hear that note missed quite a bit. So have them be careful. And also when they're crossing strings, you want to make sure that you have them rotate the shoulder so that they can have good left-hand pressure and sound really good on the G string. We haven't talked a lot about intonation thus far, but yeah, do work on your finger patterns. Make sure that those major or 2-3 finger patterns are in good shape. Make sure the minor finger patterns are in good shape. Again, most of this is pentatonic, so tuning should be relatively easy, but that doesn't mean that you need to neglect it altogether. Make sure you're working on it. Make sure you work on those finger patterns before you even pass out the parts. I want to talk about measures 22 through 29. And we kind of have a deviation from our folk style here. Now, in G pentatonic, the notes that we should see that are excluded from the scale are C and F sharp. And yet we have a 4-5-1 progression here. So we have a chord here that's built upon scale degree 4, and we shouldn't have scale degree 4 in G pentatonic. So that can be confusing for some players. It's not that they have the theory background and they're so confused by that. What they're going to be confused by is that it hasn't happened before and it doesn't really happen very much later. And when something deviates from the norm, a lot of times it causes problems in our rehearsals. And so getting those C's in tune in the low strings and getting them in tune in the second violins might be an issue. And a lot of times when I hear this, these C's are out. A lot of times because the bass players don't know that this is a C natural and that it should be played second finger on the E string. And sometimes the C's aren't high enough in the second violins. Their shoulders aren't rotating and they're playing out of tune. And like I just can't hear that rhythmic line. And a lot of times I can't hear it because it's out of tune. In season 1, episode 3, I did an episode on intonation. I talked about sound canceling and the technology behind noise canceling headphones comes from sound waves that can cancel each other out. And when you're playing out of tune, you get some sound canceling. And really the more out of tune you are, the more sound canceling you get because the more those waves will be opposite of one another and will cancel. So if you're having trouble hearing your second violins here, that might be a good place to start is with intonation. Okay, and in the next measure, we get a D major chord, and the reason why that's unusual is because in D major, it's D, F sharp, A, and we shouldn't have F sharp because F sharp is scale degree 7, and that kind of breaks from our pentatonic mode. We might say, oh, well, we could omit the third and use a D7. Yeah, well, the 7th would be C, and C is scale degree 4. We can't have scale degree 4 either. So this chord really doesn't exist, and this chord progression doesn't really exist too much in pentatonic folk music. But it's interesting the way it comes in, and it adds some more variety. The parallel fifths I'm not too concerned about here, and they usually don't create too much of a problem. C to G here, that's usually not an issue, and that's because in the pentatonic mode, traditionally, there can be a lot of parallel fifths, and if you think of like that planing, it would be non-traditional voice leading for the common practice era, but this is based on folk music, so the planing is more expected. And we can think about going from scale degree 1 to scale degree 5, and then which is a fifth, and then we plane up scale degree 2, scale degree 6, and we don't really get anything but a fifth until we go from scale degree 3 up to scale degree 1 because we're not going to play 7, so up to scale degree 1, and that's going to give us that sixth. So fifth, fifth, sixth, fifth, 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 is going to be our pattern there. So parallel fifths are not uncommon in pentatonic music, but this chord progression is uncommon. So we're going to have to work on tuning. We're going to have to work on tuning this F sharp here in 23. It's another rare occurrence that the first violins use a high 2. A lot of times they're going to be using low 2 here. And it's divisi, so you're going to have half your violin section and they really need to play that F sharp in tune. Same thing here in 25. Make sure they're playing this F sharp in tune, this F sharp in tune in 27. Anytime we get these dominant chords, we really need to make sure that the third of the chord is in tune. Okay, here in 26, it's the same as what we have here in 22. So you want to make sure that your C's are in tune here. And I already mentioned the F sharp. This time we don't get the divisi, we just get the whole note here. And then another whole note here for a rest. All right, so in measure 44, here's another spot where we change modes a little bit. And we kind of change a little bit to like an A minor mode, which means we're going to get a lot more C's. And these C's happen to be on the G string for second violins, but on the first violins, they're on the A string. So primarily they're playing low 2s in this piece, so they typically don't miss it. They typically don't play C sharp is what I mean, but a lot of times they can play it out of tune because they haven't gotten as much exposure to that note or that pattern on that string. So that's something to watch out for. Now, if we've modulated here up a whole step to A pentatonic in the minor variation, that's all fine and good, but we really shouldn't be having these G's. Now, fortunately, we can play them as open Gs, so it won't create problems for us, but it's just something different that they might not expect, so be careful, and that might affect, maybe the A or the C coming up in that pattern. I mentioned this before, but these F naturals in the bass parts are low 1, so make sure they're playing those. Also, the C naturals here, second finger on the A string, so be careful that they're not playing C sharps. A lot of times, especially if they're not playing with good tone, directors will not notice that they're playing C sharps, and that'll go unnoticed, and that's not good for your contest score, so pay attention here. And then again here, F natural, make sure we're playing those low 1s on the E string nice heavy bows. Now, if you're thinking about, a lot of beginner method books, they spend, a couple pages on the C string, but a lot of the times the C string's neglected, just kind of like how the E string is neglected for first violins, second violins, basses. And the reason is because it's not homogeneous, it's heterogeneous. It's the string that not everybody has. And so a lot of times orchestras in this classification, they forgot their C string notes. They played those 2 pages. Okay, yeah, we got it. And then they haven't seen it again for a long time. And there's quite a bit of stuff that's in the cello part, quite a bit of stuff that's in the viola part that are on the C string. And we've got some stuff in the bass part that's on the E string. So you might want to review your C string notes. It might be a bottleneck for getting this piece learned effectively. So maybe some flashcards, maybe some review on the board or whatever. Just take your violas and cellos out and make sure that they understand the C string notes so that you can do a good job with this. It requires a little bit of investment of time, but it's going to take a lot more time to spoon feed every note as it appears in context and rehearsal. So it might be one of those things where you pay it forward and then rehearsal can go smoothly after that. Well, that's what I've got for Fan Dance. I hope that you enjoyed this series. I really like this piece, and I hope that you can get a good performance with your orchestra. If there's something that I didn't go over, just like always, just drop a comment in the comment section below, and we can talk about it, and we get together and try to help you as a community solve those issues. Also, if there's something that I didn't go over, a lot of times I'll leave stuff out. Please feel free to share with everybody else and say, hey, this spot right here can be tricky. Here's what I do, and we'd like to learn from you too. So hope you enjoyed this series on Fan Dance. It's a really great piece, and we'll see you next time.